Across the decades, the sky has carried our greatest ambitions and our most enduring mysteries, from Amelia Earhart's final flight into the Pacific, to a squadron of Navy bombers that vanished without a trace from airliners lost in the calmest weather, to military transports disappearing over open ocean. The stories are separated by time, distance, and circumstance, yet united by one haunting truth. Not all who take to the air return. Tonight, we retrace the last known moments of 10 flights that left behind no answers, only questions carried on the wind. In July of 1937, one of the most ambitious flights in aviation history vanished into the vast expanse of the Pacific. Amelia Earhart, a pioneering aviator and global icon, was attempting to circumnavigate the globe in a twin-engine Lockheed Electra 1OE, accompanied by navigator Fred Noonan. Their aircraft lifted off from Lae, New Guinea, bound for Howland Island, a pinpoint on the map, just 2.5 kilometers long and one of the most isolated places on Earth. Radio transmissions in the early hours suggested they were close, but fuel was running low. Earhart's voice, calm yet urgent, reported difficulty locating the island. Then, silence. No confirmed signal was ever heard from the Electra again. The search that followed was unprecedented. Naval vessels and aircraft scoured thousands of square miles of open ocean. They found no floating debris, no trace of the crew, and no definitive answers over decades. Theories have emerged: a crash at sea near Howland, an emergency landing on an uninhabited atoll, or even capture by foreign forces. Archaeologists have examined artifacts from remote Pacific islands, each fragment hinting at the possibility of survival, yet never confirming the truth. The Lockheed Electra and the fate of those aboard remain hidden beneath the weight of time and tide. Somewhere in the deep blue silence of the Pacific, the final chapter of Amelia Earhart's journey waits, still unwritten, on the afternoon of December 5, 1945. -1 U.S. Navy Avenger torpedo bombers lifted off from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. It was a routine training mission, a simple navigation exercise over the Atlantic. The weather was fair, the aircraft well-maintained, and the pilots experienced. But within hours, Flight 19 would become one of the most enduring mysteries in aviation history. As they flew east, the formation's leader, Lieutenant Charles C. Taylor, began reporting instrument malfunctions. Compass readings contradicted each other, landmarks were unrecognizable, and the pilots grew uncertain of their position. Radio messages from the squadron grew increasingly strained. Taylor believed they were over the Florida Keys, far off their intended route, yet reports suggested they were drifting deeper into open ocean. Search planes were dispatched, but the skies were fading to dusk, and the Atlantic stretched endlessly in all directions. The last transmissions from Flight 19 carried a haunting tone. Fuel was running low, and the sea beneath was growing restless. Moments later, all contact was lost. The search and rescue effort was massive, involving hundreds of ships and aircraft. No wreckage was found. Even the rescue plane sent to locate them vanished without a trace. Over the years, theories have ranged from navigational error to sudden squalls. Yet the fate of Flight 19 remains locked within the waves. Somewhere beyond the Florida coast, the ocean holds its answer. But for now, the final moments of Flight 19 are known only to the sea. In the early hours of March 8, 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 departed Kuala Lumpur bound for Beijing. Aboard were 239 passengers and crew, representing 14 nations. The Boeing 777 climbed steadily into the night sky, following a well-traveled route across the South China Sea. For the first hour, all communications were routine. Then, somewhere over the Gulf of Thailand, the aircraft vanished from civilian Radar. Military radar later revealed an unexpected turn. Instead of continuing north toward China, MH370 banked sharply west, crossing the Malaysian peninsula and heading into the vast emptiness of the Indian Ocean. Radio contact was never re-established. Satellite data, the only remaining clue, suggested the plane continued flying for over 6 hours before disappearing along one of two possible arcs, both over remote stretches of water. What followed became the largest and most costly search in aviation history. Teams from multiple nations scoured over 120,000 square kilometers of seabed. In the years that followed, fragments of aircraft wreckage began to wash ashore on islands off Africa's east coast, each confirmed to be from MH370, yet the main fuselage, flight recorders, and the final moments of the crew and passengers remain undiscovered. Technical experts point to a mid-flight systems failure, deliberate action, or catastrophic event. But without definitive evidence, the mystery endures. Somewhere beneath the shifting swells of the southern Indian Ocean, Flight MH370 rests in silence, its story still incomplete, its questions still unanswered. On the night of March 16th, 1962, Flying Tiger Line Flight 739 departed Guam on a routine leg toward the Philippines. On board the Lockheed L-1049 Super Constellation were 11 crew members and 96 passengers, most of them U.S. Army personnel bound for Vietnam. The weather was calm, the aircraft in good order, and radio contact was steady as it crossed the Western Pacific. 3 hours into the flight, without any distress signal, Flight 739 disappeared from radar. No mayday, no sign of trouble. The U.S. military initiated a vast search operation, deploying ships and aircraft across 200,000 square miles of ocean. Despite days of systematic sweeps, no wreckage, all slick, all debris was found. Then, an unusual report surfaced. The crew of a nearby tanker claimed they had witnessed a bright flash high in the night sky, followed by fragments falling toward the sea. Investigators considered the possibility of an in-flight explosion. Yet no physical evidence ever confirmed it. The absence of floating debris puzzled search teams. In most crashes at sea, some trace remains. The final report listed the cause as undetermined, leaving families and researchers to speculate. Some point to mechanical failure, others to sabotage, and a few to more complex geopolitical possibilities linked to the passenger's military mission. Today, the fate of Flight 739 lingers as one of the Pacific's most complete vanishings. A journey that began in routine silence and ended somewhere beyond the reach of record or witness. On the night of January 30th, 1948, a British South American Airways Avro 224, known as the Star Tiger, was en route from the Azores to Bermuda. Aboard were 25 passengers and crew, including experienced Captain Brian W. McMillan. The weather forecast called for mild conditions, though strong winds and light rain were expected near Bermuda. The flight progressed normally. Through most of the journey, radio transmissions between the Star Tiger and ground stations were routine, the crew reporting altitude adjustments to compensate for the winds. But as the aircraft approached its destination in the early morning hours, something changed. At 3:04 a.m., a radio operator at Bermuda received a position report placing the plane less than 2 hours from arrival. The crew's tone was calm, confident. It was the last message ever received. When the Star Tiger failed to appear, an immediate search was launched. Naval vessels and aircraft combed the area for days, but not a single trace, no wreckage, no bodies, no oil slick was found. The Avro Tudor was a reliable, modern airliner for its time, making its disappearance all the more perplexing. Investigators suggested possibilities: a sudden fuel loss, navigational error, or unexpected weather. Yet without physical evidence, the cause remained a blank space in the record. The Star Tiger was never seen again, joining a growing list of aircraft lost in the region now often referred to as the Bermuda Triangle, a place where departures are certain, but arrivals are not always guaranteed. On the morning of January 17, 1949, a British South American Airways Avro Tudor Mark IVB, named the Star Ariel, prepared to depart Bermuda for Kingston, Jamaica. The skies were clear, the seas calm, and the weather forecast ideal for flying. Captain John Clother McPhee, an experienced pilot, reported no concerns as the aircraft lifted smoothly into the blue. For the first hour, all communications were routine. The Star Ariel maintained radio contact, reporting altitude and position without any hint of difficulty. Then, just past the halfway point to Jamaica, the transmission stopped. There was no distress call, no sign of technical trouble, only silence. Search operations began swiftly. Aircraft and ships scoured the entire route, focusing on the turquoise expanse between Bermuda and Jamaica. Conditions remained favorable, aiding visibility. Yet despite the scale of the search, not a single fragment of wreckage was ever recovered. The Avro Tudor's disappearance was especially unsettling, coming less than a year after the loss of its sister ship, the Star Tiger. Both vanished in seemingly good weather, both without distress calls, and both within the loosely defined area of ocean later linked to the Bermuda Triangle legend. Official investigations offered no definitive explanation. Hypotheses ranged from sudden structural failure to fuel problems, but without physical evidence, all remain speculation today. The Star Ariel exists only in flight logs and fading memory, a reminder that even in the clearest skies, an aircraft can vanish, leaving behind nothing but unanswered questions. On the morning of November 8, 1957, Pan American World Airways Flight 7, known as the Clipper Romance of the Skies, departed San Francisco on the first leg of its round-the-world service to Honolulu. The Boeing 377 Stratocruiser carried 36 passengers and 8 crew members, including veteran Captain Gordon H. Brown. The weather was calm, visibility excellent, and the transoceanic journey was expected to be routine. For hours, the aircraft maintained normal communication and flight path, but as it crossed the vast Pacific, something went wrong. Scheduled radio check-ins were missed. Attempts to contact the Clipper brought no reply. Somewhere between California and Hawaii, the Stratocruiser had vanished. The following day, search crews spotted debris floating roughly 900 miles northeast of Honolulu. Bodies were recovered, but the wreckage was scattered, and the fuselage lay far beneath the surface. Autopsies revealed high levels of carbon monoxide in the victims, an unusual and troubling clue suggesting possible cabin contamination before the crash. Investigators considered several possibilities: mechanical failure, a fire on board, or a deliberate act. Yet without the aircraft's flight recorders, the exact sequence of events remained elusive. Flight 7's loss was a deep blow to Pan Am's trans-Pacific service and a sobering reminder of the risks of early long-haul aviation. Even today, the cause remains undetermined. Somewhere in the depths of the Pacific, the Clipper Romance of the Skies rests, its final moments preserved only in silence. On the night of June 23, 1950, Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 2501 departed New York, bound for Seattle with a planned stop in Minneapolis. The Douglas DC-4 carried 55 passengers and 3 crew members, navigating under the warm summer skies of the American Midwest. As the flight approached Lake Michigan, weather reports warned of turbulent conditions ahead. Captain Robert Lind requested clearance to descend from 3,500 to 2,500 feet to avoid severe thunderstorms. Air traffic control denied the request due to conflicting traffic, instructing the flight to maintain its altitude at 11:13 p.m. Flight 2501 sent its last routine position report over Lake Michigan moments later. It vanished from radar. No distress signal was received, and no further communication was made. A massive search operation followed, involving Coast Guard cutters, Navy vessels, and civilian boats, within days. Small fragments of debris and human remains were found floating near South Haven, Michigan, but the main wreckage was never located. The lake's depths, reaching over 850 feet, concealed the deceiver completely over the years. Divers and sonar teams have scoured the lake bed, yet no definitive trace of the FUSELAD has been found. The cause remains speculative, whether structural failure or disorientation in the storm. Beneath the shifting waves of Lake Michigan, Flight 501 remains entombed in darkness, its final descent still unwitnessed and unexplained. On the morning of September 9, 1949, Canadian Pacific Airlines Flight 108 prepared for a short journey from Quebec City to Baie-Comeau, with a stopover in Montreal. The aircraft, a Douglas DC-3, carried 19 passengers and 4 crew members, climbing smoothly into clear skies over the St. Lawrence River Valley, shortly after departure from Quebec City. The routine flight turned catastrophic at 10:42 a.m. A sudden explosion tore through the DC-3 while it cruised at 3,000 feet. Witnesses on the ground saw debris scatter across farmland near Soltocochin. The aircraft plummeted, breaking apart before it hit the earth. All 23 people aboard were killed instantly. Investigators quickly determined the cause was no mechanical failure. The blast had originated in the forward baggage compartment, where traces of a time-delayed explosive device were found. The shocking truth emerged. The disaster was the result of deliberate sabotage. The investigation led to a chilling discovery. The bomb had been placed by Albert Gay, the Quebec City jeweler, in a plot to kill his wife, who was among the passengers. His motive was personal gain through life insurance. 2 accomplices, who assisted in building and placing the device, were also implicated. All 3 were tried, convicted, and executed, while the crime was ultimately solved. Flight 108's destruction remains etched in Canadian history, a reminder that sometimes the greatest dangers to flight come not from nature or machine, but from human intent. Yet the moment before the blast, as the DC-3 glided peacefully over the St. Lawrence, exists only in silence. On October 13, 1972, a Fairchild F-82-7D of the Uruguayan Air Force lifted off from Montevideo, carrying the rugby team, their friends and family members bound for Santiago, Chile. Spirits were high as the aircraft crossed the Andes, but unpredictable mountain weather soon began to close in. Flying through heavy cloud, the crew misjudged their position, believing they were further west than they were, preparing to descend toward Santiago. The aircraft instead struck a glacier at over 12,000 feet. The fuselage broke apart, sliding down an icy slope before coming to rest on a remote snowfield surrounded by towering peaks. Miraculously, many survived the initial impact, but rescue was far from certain. With no contact and a white aircraft against a white landscape, search planes passed overhead without spotting the wreck. Supplies dwindled. Temperatures dropped below freezing each night. Days turned into weeks. Faced with starvation, the survivors made a decision that would later draw worldwide attention. They resorted to consuming the remains of those who had perished, a choice made in desperation to cling to life. Finally, After 72 days in the mountains, 2 men set out on foot, crossing treacherous terrain to find help. Their journey led to the rescue of the remaining survivors. While the crash site has been thoroughly documented, the questions of fate, endurance, and the human will to survive remain. In the silent expanse of the Andes, the broken fuselage of Flight 571 still rests, a frozen monument to a story that is as much about survival as it is about tragedy.